So hey everybody. As I said, we've got a really great group of panelists and not that much time, so I'm just going to get right to it. Starting from the left down there, we've got Dr. Ramses Al-Said.
Al-Qaid.
Really?
Al-Qaid.
Al-Qaid.
Yes,
Jeez, I invested in you. I can't pronounce your last name. Of Nurable. This panel is changing all the time, so I actually didn't catch your name.
I'm Rob Jacobs, sorry.
Rob Jacobs.
From
and where are you?
Tufts University.
Okay,
We're doing
excellent.
BCI stuff there.
And then we have Judith Fernandez, and we saw some of your really awesome work earlier in the first talk. And again, I didn't catch your name because you're new as well.
Caroline Harriet.
Caroline Harriet from Draper.
Yes.
And then we have, I'm going to ruin your last name. Okay, so we have Connor Rossomano from OpenBCI. So can somebody, I just need a volunteer for this first question, but can somebody just tell me a quick overview of what HCI is and how it applies to AR?
Sure. I think the Draper individual is probably the best, because this is your minefield right here.
Sure. So human-computer interaction, we want to make sure that people get what they need from a complex system and that we present information in the right way so that you can make use of it fast and in certain situations fast. In AR, we want to make sure we're presenting the right information at the right time, at the right fidelity, and the right data rate, all of that, to have an accurate picture of the augmented world on top of the real world.
Interesting. And we hear a lot about what the killer app is going to be in VR and in AR, but what do you think the killer interaction will be for AR, and is this something that any of you are working on right now? And I'll just let you want to start? You have the cool thing in your head?
Sure. Well, I think that we over the last few years we've seen this wave of VR and now AR, and the idea of having this funny thing on your head is more and more normal as opposed to 5 years ago. And I think what it's doing is it's providing a really cool opportunity to do stuff like this and embed biometric sensors into AR and VR systems. So I think that the future 10, 15 years from now, it's inevitable that we'll be interacting with the world through augmented reality on a daily basis. And what that means is I think we will inevitably also be connected to technology in a more passive way. So I'm really excited about not necessarily using BCI or HCI to interact with the world, but rather have our experiences react to our brains and essentially almost have this real-time kind of closed feedback system where everything that we're perceiving and interacting with is based on the way that we've experienced the past. So almost like this choose your own adventure, except it's happening subconsciously.
I think what's really cool about that is that Connor's work, he's focused a lot about kind of using brain activity as a system that records kind of what's happening and then reacts to it. And a lot of the work that we do at Neurable is about using your brain activity to interact in an augmented reality environment. So, right now, and what you're saying is the killer interaction. I mean, how many of you guys out here have actually used a HoloLens? Can I get an arm? Yeah. So something that you immediately notice very easily is how when you're typing, sometimes you have issues with it, or it just doesn't feel natural and right. And so really what I think is going to be the killer interaction, the thing that turns it from something that's niche and cool to something that's truly a computing platform for the masses, is going to be that next system that makes it feel natural. And that's really where I believe that brain-computer interfaces are going. And to me, it's going to happen in the next 5 years, that we're going to get brain-computer interfaces that work with augmented reality devices to really give you that next level of experience when you're interacting in these worlds. And that's what, to me, is the killer interaction.
And I think the killer problem is input. Augmented reality showers you with information, but it's really hard to control the stupid thing. You had some little button or something. So I think we need better ways to get input from the person. And they can't really use their hands because they're in the real world. So in virtual reality, your hands are fine. But in AR, you're also in the real world. So we need better ways to suck information out of people into the equipment. And brain is a very good way to do that.
I agree.
I think the killer app interaction, these devices are going to get smaller and smaller and probably going to be just contact lenses. But I think for me what is really interesting is how are we going to augment human capabilities. So using systems like augmented and virtual reality, how are we going to make our brains work even faster, learn faster as well, even just like increase our, like superhumans basically. So. And I think it's going to be as well like getting your biometric data and getting like the stimulus in the right moment at the right time, whenever you're interacting with people at a distance in the same environment or like learning something. So I think far beyond, but that's what it is.
I agree with a lot of what everybody's saying, and I also think it would be a powerful thing to be able to see what machines are doing in a faster, easier way to that just look at a complex system or a robot and sort of see what it's thinking in real time. So as you're monitoring a bunch of stuff, you can do that faster.
And what are some best practices that designers and product managers and others should follow in terms of these types of interfaces and interactions, and what are some things to avoid in your experiences?
Minimize spam.
Be gentle, be subtle. You know, the people, do something sort of not too annoying. Anyone remember Microsoft Clippy? Don't be Microsoft Clippy, but with new inputs. Just give things that are a little bit different, a little bit better, that'll improve interaction.
I think it's essential to have a multidisciplinary team where like both hardware and software and designers and psychologists even, or like neuroscience work together. So then to create like a better platforms in general. So, because like, for example, the HoloLens is an amazing device. And because of like maybe computing, like this thing is like, the battery actually lasts a lot, but because of the depth sensors, et cetera, maybe they had to restrict the way they interact with the system. But that doesn't mean that, it's possible. So I think it's really important that all the teams work together to try to make it the best product and system. Yeah.
I think one thing that is really important for designers to think about is we're finally entering a three-dimensional space. Imagine the world that we've had beforehand. We have computers. Everything is a flat screen. Every type of interaction that you do is on a two-dimensional plane. And so really adding a third dimension adds a completely different aspect of information, how you can receive and give. And because of this new form that's more natural of receiving information, I think one of the things that people need to really respect is how the brain plays into it and how we can naturally interact with it. There's great companies. I don't know. I'm going to ask this question now. Who here has used a Meta 2? A few of you. Now, you know from those people, and I welcome you guys to talk to them, they have really good ideas as to something called the hand-brain connection, and they really respect how you interact with objects in 3D space. I think it's incredible. There's another company called iFluence that does the same thing. And so I think really learning to respect how we interact with the world now that we have this brand new three-dimensional truly natural way of representing information is something that we truly have to respect in order to make it natural to use for individuals.
And what are some of the projects that you all on the stage are working on relating to these new types of interactions specifically applied to AR? Like I know I looked at some of your projects, like the arachnophobia one, which I thought was super interesting. I have a husband who is arachnophobic, saw me looking this up last night and like jumped away. So I like some specific examples of what you guys are seeing and doing.
So I've been working on implicit brain-computer interfaces, so a little different from Ramses. We're asking people to not do anything special with their brain, just do whatever they're doing. We will measure the state of their brain, and we'll tweak the user interface in order to make it better for them in real time. So this is not the concentrate and imagine moving your left foot. This is the just do whatever you're doing, and we just make things better. And we give people various tasks where we can measure their performance. There's in a range of different settings. And we can get actually objective improvements in performance and without sort of bothering them with knowing what's going on or concentrating on this. The goal is to try to get useful information from the person without taking any physical action and without even taking away their attention. So that's the general category of stuff we're doing.
I would say kind of the work that we're doing, we're taking the different modalities that exist for brain-computer interfaces. There's actually different ways that humans can interact with brain technology. And what we're doing is we're basically finding different pain points that exist within augmented reality and virtual reality. Because the reality of it is, I've said reality 3 times now, is that using your hands to rotate an object makes sense. Using different types of interactions, for example, voice, makes sense in certain situations. But then there's some areas, for example, typing. It feels really great to do on a keyboard, but it doesn't feel natural to stick your finger out and tap one letter at a time, which is what you do right now with the HoloLens. And so those are the types of interactions that we're really focusing on, both on the gaming end and on productivity end, that will enable these technologies to leverage the ecosystems of interaction methods to really create kind of a unified experience for a user in the future.
This is something I'm not actually working on right now, but something I would like to be working on. We're talking about kind of the HCI plus the AR, but I think another critical component of the future of this space is how artificial intelligence fits into just product design and the software design that's kind of the back end of this entire system. I believe that with biometrics and design for wearables, the cookie cutter approach can only take you so far. There's never going to be like a Nike size 10 of AR and brain machine interfacing. I think you can create the ball of clay that kind of models the average human brain, but then the system still has to adapt to the individual. So AR provides this really cool opportunity for us to render things over the real world. And as soon as we embed biometrics into that, we can now build data sets that are a representation of the way that our brain and our mind respond to certain stimuli. And I think then the next step is how do we take that system and incorporate artificial intelligence into it to have it so the system truly adapts to the individual. So this is where I would like to be focusing my mental energy in the future. Yep.
And I understand you, Caroline, you do work in that area as well. You want to explain?
Sure. So we're using augmented reality in a couple different ways. One is in conjunction with like a full body alerting system based on environmental context or the context of what the person is doing, who they are, what they need at that given time. A lot of what we're interested in augmented reality for at Draper is to represent complex data that's moving really fast in real time. So something like riding in a self-driving car, for example. There's all the sensor information around you that the car can see, but how do we represent that to you laid over the physical space in a way that makes sense that you can actually use?
And where do you guys think that we need to go to have an experience that feels truly natural, right? Like we talk about all these different peripherals, all these types of inputs and interactions. Do you think we can get there? And if so, how long is it going to be until we do, and what will it look like?
Yes, of course we can get there, but it could be a very, very long time. I mean, our eyes and our other senses send stuff into our brain. Surely we could send the same stuff in from a device, but it might be a very long time. Don't invest in this now.
Actually, if you look at some of the latest research that is coming out, not only is there brain-computer interfaces, but now there's a new development of computer-to-brain interfaces. And so we are headed toward that direction. And last year, actually, they demonstrated that not only, and of course, this was more of a publicity stunt because it's been possible for a while now, actually for about 20 years. They've actually been able to have somebody across the ocean basically send a brain command and then have it stimulate a person's muscle activity in the United States and press a button in a game. And they were able to play an entire game just using their brain activity. So these technologies are out there, and to Rob's point, it's something that is going to be around, but it's just that type of level of connection is going to take at least 10 to 50 years. But when it comes to more of these simple interfaces that use non-invasive technologies, in my opinion, we're just about 5 years out to really seeing things change in a truly exciting way.
Yeah, I think there are, with the evolution of BCI, and basically that, there's kind of the two branches, which are the non-invasive and the invasive. There's a lot of interest now in putting sensors inside of people's heads, and not just sensors, stimulators as well, which provides the opportunity for kind of a closed loop feedback system. But I think we still have not plateaued in terms of where we can take non-invasive technology, and Ramses and Neurable are really kind of pushing the envelope on how much control and how much real-time interaction can we actually have with sensors outside of the skull. But we'll also see progress in the invasive space, and it's kind of exciting to think about as AR becomes more and more discrete, and the sensors that we are using to record the data maybe are no longer outside of our body. That's a really fascinating future. Yeah.
And I think one thing, just to kind of touch on that one more time, you got to think about what you mean by the ultimate interface. Do you mean something like the Matrix, when you're inside like a floating liquid and everything is happening to you just through your brain directly? Or are you talking about literally putting a chip inside that can at least make you have those sensations, and you still have an Oculus-like head-mounted display and things like that? And those are vastly different ranges of where you can get to. But
does it matter if you can't tell the difference? Does it matter what the technology is?
I guess it only matters is if you decide to ever leave, right?
Yes.
I could ask if you think we're living in a simulation right now, but I don't want to know the answer to that.
Speak for yourself.
So this year at CES, voice was everywhere, especially with Alexa. What do you think about voice as a form of interaction applied to AR? Is it how important is it in the scope of all the other, we talked a lot about BCI. What are your feelings on voice as an interaction? You look like you're wavering. Are you recording your brainwaves right now?
I am.
Where is that going? Can we?
My computer's over there. I'm recording everything. I'm actually recording all of your brainwaves too.
We're in a simulation.
You're in a simulation. Where is it going? Voice. I think there's pretty high latency with voice. I think that BCI and even more subtle forms of EMG could communicate data much faster than voice recognition. Do you guys ever do you ever talk to yourself and hear and feel your tongue moving as you're thinking thoughts in your head? I've always been curious if it's possible to embed sensors in your tongue and in your throat to basically pick up the EMG data that you're using to move your tongue, and as opposed to actually expelling air, you just take that data and render speech or text. So I think that could be faster.
Excuse me. I think yes, people have done this. I think for pilots in very noisy airplanes, in fighters.
Yeah.
I think so.
Maybe we'll get there.
And there's some situations where voice doesn't even work. Think about for example, there was somebody here who used to work at Daiquiri, right? Imagine you're having one of these AR helmets. You're out in a work area. It's noisy. Your hands should be working on the dangerous thing you're working on. But then somebody comes in to give you instructions, right? This is where you need something, where voice won't work because it's too noisy. And so how do you make that kind of system work? And I think voice is a powerful tool. But you also don't want to be on the bus speaking to yourself, just because you're making a text, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is where brain-computer interfaces kind of become also more of a private system for you to communicate and interact with.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think it depends a lot on the application. So, for example, I was working in a project that actually I'm going to present tomorrow, but basically it's like a painting tool. So you basically paint using the HoloLens and you draw in the air. And while I was developing, I realized I wanted to change the brush easily. So for example, the Vive in VR, they have the menu just in the joystick, wherever, on the input. And then I wanted just to change it as if it was almost telepathy. So in that way, it really worked very well. So I have a menu that it's as a bracelet, and then I change the option just saying it loud. So I don't even have to look into the bracelet or the menu while I'm painting. And then maybe you can splash paint in the ceilings, and then I just change the color also by saying it. So in that case, it really worked really well, especially if you think in such an application, I'm not going to be in front of a lot of people, so it's not going to look weird. But I think it depends a lot on the application.
If you had to specify finally, there are hundreds of brushes, and I wanted the brush with a little more in that direction. Now the voice is popping out. So it depends.
Yeah.
That's where AI could come into, like you mentioned, if it's able to sort of interpret based on what you've done and where you're going, what type of brush you want, could be super interesting. All right, so we are wrapping up, but I guess just very quickly, if we could go down the line and say, one important thing that you want everybody in this room to know about interaction in AR? Quick. Rapid
Start on
fire.
that side. No.
Ramses is always prepared. We could start on that.
Ramses, go.
That we really want, sorry.
All I would say is right now we're at a point in our lives where basically the Apple II was. And really what we need to do is we need to create what the mouse did and brought in graphical user interfaces. We're all creating the rules right now as to what the future of interaction is going to be. And in my opinion, it's brain-computer interface is going to be what's going to lead the way. But really, it's going to be an ecosystem of solutions. And so thinking about it from that perspective, I think is something that everyone should have in mind as they develop these solutions.
So I would say people are not changing rapidly. People are hardly changing at all. Evolution is extremely slow. So think about these things not in terms of the devices, but in terms of what it's like as a person and what people are made to do. So I think of interfaces as being reality-based. All of our things ought to be based on how we interact with the real world. The more weird things you make us do, the less likely this is to work well. The more things you do that come closer to our natural world, the better they're going to work. And AR does a beautiful job of getting us in that direction.
I think society is rapidly changing. I mean, you can see technologies, like kids are currently growing up with all these technologies. So I think it's really important to look into research that is actually looking at what's the effect in our, just like day-to-day. And especially for children, I believe it's going to be the next generation. It's going to change education. It's going to change health, the way we perceive our world. So that's...
I think that a very specific use case of when like a HoloLens would make life a lot easier. I don't know if I have a lot of good answers for when it's like the best thing ever to use. So I think focusing on those kind of questions is a good idea.
Yeah, I would say, there's a lot of stuff that we can design, but I think it's important to ask the question, not can we, but should we? So I think it's important to think about, as not just as engineers, but designers, there are many future dystopian scenarios where we are, in this environment and we can't get out of it. And, our experience is thrown at us and we don't have a choice. So I think it's important to both think about what we want to design, but also what we want to avoid, stake that territory out, design around it. That's what I would say.
All right, great points. Thank you all so much, and hope you guys have a good rest of the day.